Thankful that you've come this morning to hear me. I'm going to try and help you get started in your family history. And thanks to our fabulous technology people who made this happen, because otherwise we would have been in some trouble. So let's get going here. All right. Any journey needs a destination. It is fun to wander, but if you're going to make a trip, you need to know where you're going. So the first thing you have to ask yourself when you want to get started with your family history is, why are you doing it? Now, there are lots of reasons. It might be just plain curiosity, which is how I got started. Maybe you've been asked to prepare some information for a family reunion. Maybe there's some medical history in your family that you want to learn more about or need to learn more about. There are a lot of different cultures who research and learn about their ancestry and know about their ancestry because that's their culture or their religion. And of course, you may be familiar with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and how they want to join their families for time and all eternity and need to identify them. And so that's their reasons for doing that. And you may be interested in joining some sort of hereditary society, such as the Daughters of the American Revolution. And what your goals are going to kind of direct your process, if that makes sense. For instance, if you're looking to join the Daughters of the American Revolution, your record keeping is going to have to be a lot more meticulous than if you just want to know where you came from, okay? Which hopefully you'll still do some good record keeping, but your first job is to talk to your family members. Now, I recognize a lot of times when I teach these classes, I say, talk to your older family members. Excuse me. Some of you are the older family members, okay? And so that makes it a little complicated. But I'll tell you a great story. Her name was Sharon Garner. She was in our stake many years ago, and they've moved out to somewhere out west. Well, her ancestry was black and Polish and Cherokee, and she wanted to learn more about her family, and she said, I just don't have anybody but 2 old aunties. And I said, well, contact them. So she wrote them both a letter. Well, she never heard back from the 2 old aunties, but those 2 letters made the cousin network. You know about that cousin network, right? And before the year was up, Sharon was writing a family newsletter, and this was long before the days of the internet, so she was actually making copies and mailing to almost 100 family members. So talk to your family members, even if it's lateral family members. You don't know who has some family diary, journal, family Bible, some sort of record that might help you. I always say that family history is like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, okay? Sometimes you get nothing. Sometimes you get a document that you've been looking for that provides more questions than it does answers. So be prepared for that. When you do talk to them, be considerate. Everybody's got family skeletons and horse thieves in their ancestry, okay? So if somebody seems a little reticent and not really willing to open up, there might be something going on. So be respectful, be considerate. When I got started, I was so interested in putting the data in the little spots, okay, that I neglected some of the stories and didn't record them like maybe I should have. Now, those charts and forms are great, but they're boring, right? The stories are what really put the meat on the bones. And they can also contain some important clues to get your research back further. And then I read an article, don't let me miss this one. Pray for your ancestors. Pray about your ancestors. Pray for help as you're researching them. I tell everybody this is a spiritual work. And regardless of what church you go to every Sunday, this is a spiritual work. You're going to find that spiritual connection as you do your research. But I read an article once that talked about how my grandchildren won't know anything about my grandparents unless I'm the one who tells them. And there's a lot of important things, lessons that we can learn. When I was 17 years old, I moved from Boston to Miami. I got on an airplane with a suitcase. My dad took me to the airport. My grandmother picked me up at the airport. And then I learned about my great-grandmother. At the same age, she got on a ship in Liverpool, far from her Irish hometown, and spent who knows how long, weeks, coming across the Atlantic. Well, her brother and sister were here to meet her. She had 2 pieces of baggage in steerage class, did I learn something important about me and about my heritage as I learned about Kate? Yes. So, learn about your history to pass it down to your descendants. I'm very pleased to say that I blatantly stole this image off the internet. I did not take this photograph. Okay. I have nothing to do with this image. My room looks a little better than that. But you do need to find some sort of organizational system, okay? You're going to avoid a lot of errors that way. You're going to be a lot more effective as a researcher. If you're a little intimidated by technology, you don't have to be technologically proficient to do family history. You can have a paper and pen system. You can create your own. Everybody's brain is different, thank goodness. So what works for you may not work for me and vice versa, okay? So you can do it with paper and pen. There are also a lot of standalone applications that are not internet-based or related that you can use. One is called Roots Magic. One is called Family Tree Maker. Family Tree Maker has been around for a long time. I personally didn't find it user-friendly. I use Roots Magic myself and find it a little bit more intuitive, but I'm not getting commission from them, so you make your own decision. Google it. The answer to everything is out there, okay? Just Google it. Standalone family history applications, and you can learn about them, and some people actually have taken the time to rate them and talk about what they do and what they can't do. If you want to get organized with an online tree, there are multiple options there. Obviously, the big one is Ancestry. That's the one that's going to cost you some money. The upside of that is on Ancestry, you create your tree and no one edits your tree, okay? Familysearch.org is a free tree, but its intent was to be a one world tree, okay? Which means that people could potentially edit your tree. And I've heard lots of stories, one from your wife, because somebody kept fixing her grandmother's name, and I don't blame her. So keep that in mind. Now, so again, why you're doing this is going to help you decide which way you want to go, okay? There's also MyHeritage is a good one. Wiki Tree is a free one, and it's a good one. A lot of people use that. The upside of using online trees is it's going to put you in contact with other people whom you may be related to. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of having cousins in Argentina. I knew that I had relatives that stayed in Argentina because my great-grandparents came from Italy to Buenos Aires and then came up to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Her brother stayed there. So I knew I had cousins, but it wasn't until Family Search came online that I was able to locate those cousins. We've Skyped, we've emailed back and forth. I've identified other family members that way, and one day hope to get down there and meet them. So there's a reason why you keep a family tree online. All right. I really had hoped that I was going to be in a classroom, a little bit more intimate setting. Than this is a little intimidating to me. And my visual aids are sitting right here. Anyway, the next thing you need to do is make sure you know your location, where your ancestors were from. Now, I'm not saying you have to do like I'm doing and read a 900-page history of Prussia, because you're still stuck 45 years later trying to figure out where he was from. But a case in point is Philip Fitzgerald. Does anybody know who Philip Fitzgerald is? He was Margaret Mitchell's grandfather, okay? What location claims to be the home of Gone with the Wind? Jonesboro, right? Clayton County. Where is Philip Fitzgerald buried? He's in the Fayetteville City Cemetery. Why? Because when he died, his land and his property, all that was in Fayette County, and then Clayton County was created, putting his land in Clayton County. So you can see where when you're searching for land records and other records, you need to know, you have to have it like a timeline of your ancestor and then a timeline of the location. There are a couple of good sources. One is the Family Search Wiki, which apparently is going on at the same, there's a class on the Family Search Wiki going on right now, I think. or later on today. Somebody said don't talk too much about it because somebody else is teaching that class. But I highly suggest that you find out about it and learn more about it. Because if you need to know something about your ancestors, or why you're having trouble researching, or how to research better, so many things can affect record keeping, and I've put kind of a list here. One of the biggest ones was from Germany, is families didn't want their sons being conscripted into the Kaiser's army and being made cannon fodder. So they were immigrating in huge numbers. So you see how the history of the region is going to affect your research. And if you make sure that I have your email address before you leave, I meant to pass around a piece of paper and the technology issues made me forget. But if you make sure I have your email address, I will share this presentation with you so you'll have all the links, because there's a few more other links coming up. Now, you've spent some time researching. You've gathered some good information. What are you going to do with it? Now remember, your why should be kind of helping you move this process along, but you might find yourself doing things that you never ever thought you would do, such as create a website, write a blog, write a short family history on a specific branch of the family. And what's going to happen to your research when you're gone? Nobody likes to think about that, but it happens. And I have 5 books full of my husband's aunt's research, 2 boxes full of my mother-in-law's photographs and documents. What's going to happen to yours when you're gone? So give that some thought. Do you want it preserved somehow? What are you going to do with it? You've put a lot of effort into it. What was the point? Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. Here are some excellent resources for getting more into the nitty-gritty. I'm trying to give you just kind of a diving board platform to dive in with. A lot of free courses here. Roots Tech, anybody heard of Roots Tech? Yes, it just happened last week. I haven't seen a bit of it because I've been so busy. But all of the classes, just like this one, have been recorded. Where are they recording this one? Somebody said they were going to record it and put it on Roots. I meant to look for the camera. Oh. Anyway, sorry. All of the Roots Tech presentations, both the talks and the classes, are on rootstech.org. And every topic you can possibly imagine is on there. Okay, so go to rootstech.org. Don't plan on doing anything for the rest of the day, because this is a rabbit hole that you're going to fall down and never come up. I want to recommend, if you're researching African American ancestry, it's written in the presentation, but it's called Somerset Homecoming. And it's written by a lady whose middle school age daughter had to do that My Family History project. Well, Mom got kind of interested. At the time, she was a social worker in Richmond, Virginia. And she did the right thing. She started talking to family members. And she'd get this little tidbit here and that little tidbit there. And by the time she was finished, she had traced her ancestors back to the plantation where they had been enslaved. Then she started tracking the descendants of the other slaves and getting in touch with them. By the time she was done, she had a reunion of both the descendants of the slaves and the slave owners. You remember we talked about how we're all one family. And she was on the Today Show and the Good Morning America, all those shows. She retired recently as, wait for it, curator of the Plantation Museum where her ancestors had been enslaved. Now, is that not the best, turn around, go around? I know there's a phrase for it, but it's escaping me at the moment. But the reason I recommend this book is that in the process of telling how she did it, she's written the best how-to on African American family history that I've ever read. And I spent a few years as the director of the Jonesboro Family History Center, and so I wanted a resource like that. And I read a lot of them, but some of them were pretty dry and dusty. This is the best one. Also, another suggestion from that perspective is if you don't have to read all of Roots unless you want to, which it's a very good book. Starting in chapter 118, he talks about how he did his research. So that's another resource because you may wind up having to do the same types of research. Okay, if you go to Familysearch.org, some of you may recognize this landing page behind me, and click on the little question mark up at the top. It'll give you a drop-down box that goes to how to do family history. And if you click on that link, you will get a question. How do you want to get started? Remember the why question we had to ask ourselves? What is it you're trying to do? And they've really made it simple. Do you just want to make family discoveries or personal discoveries or get started? And so you can take one of those branches and get going on your family history. All right, I'm not going to teach you anything about DNA today because there are some really much more qualified people than I to do that. But on Familysearch.org, there's an excellent article in trying to understand the science behind DNA and family history. If you're looking more for a medical result with your DNA information, 23andMe gives you a medical result. I taught a class once. It wasn't in DNA, but we mentioned it. It was just starting to come out. And the lady said, I've had stomach issues all my life. She said, and I did the 23andMe, took the results to my doctor, and he went, oh, that's what your problem is. And he switched her medicine, and she was fine. So if you're having stomach issues, consider that. Anyway, a lot of people go with Ancestry because they have the largest database. So you're more likely to make that DNA connection. However, it can be frustrating because you'll get a third cousin result who has no tree. And so you're like, how are we related? My experience was when I first had mine done, a lady contacted me and she said, I was adopted as a child and I'm trying to find my relatives. She said, but it's okay if you don't want to talk to me. I understand. Apparently she's had a little trepidation about doing this. And she said, the only names I know in my family are this, this, and this. And she listed some names and I didn't know. So then my mom took the test. And suddenly the same person came to my mom and said, hey, I think so now we've narrowed it down. We've eliminated half of the possibilities. It's a cousin of mine. It's a very close relative of my mom's. And so my mom has 3 siblings. We ruled out Aunt Grace, but she had 2 brothers who were long-distance truck drivers. One of my mom's brothers is 6'7". And her birth certificate listed her mother's name, which I thought was odd, but not the father's name, but a physical description of the father, 6'7". So she's Uncle Paul's daughter. So when you do the DNA thing, be aware that you might find out some things that you may or may not. I have no problem with that. I'm not going to judge anybody because I don't want to be judged, right? But be cognizant of the fact that who was that news broadcaster that wrote a book on finding out that the man he called dad all of his life wasn't his dad? So just be aware that you could find some fairly shocking things. Google it. What will happen if I do my DNA? Some people are adamant they're not going to do it because they don't want it to go in a government database. There have been several cold cases solved because they used these DNA databases. Personally, I don't have a problem with sharing my DNA if it gets somebody off the streets that doesn't need to be. But everybody's different, that whole search and seizure thing, and if that's your thing, that's fine. And I think that that's the end of that one, and I'm doing great for time. So we're going to switch over. Now that I've tried to help you get started, get some ideas, any questions on getting started? Have you thought about this enough to wonder what you should do next? See, I was really hoping I wanted to be down there, but they said, no, you need the microphone. All right, any questions? You ready to? There are several websites for military records, and if you make sure I have your email address and jot that down as a reminder to me, there are lots of websites. I have a presentation for that I can share with you. So now that I've helped you kind of give birth to your family history research, we're going to talk about how to kill your family history research. All right. Now, of course, my little visual aids are not lined up right, because that's what I was planning on doing. Here we go. All right, how to kill. Didn't cite my sources. I know that feels like being back in college, but there's going to come a time when either you or someone else is going to go, where'd you find that? And you don't want to go. This is the been there, done that, room full of t-shirts presentation, okay? Because almost everything on here I have done, okay? Write it down, put it in your notes, list it in your standalone app, put it on your family tree that's online, but put it somewhere where you heard that, even if it was Aunt Grace told you that, okay? But if it's a fact on your family tree, there needs to be a source, okay? And that goes with, if you go into Ancestry and you find somebody with a family tree that you have a common relative, and you see that their tree lists 0 sources, run in the opposite direction, okay? Or you could use it as like Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs, okay? They're saying this is a fact, can I document it? They're saying this is a fact, can I document it? Otherwise, it belongs in what we librarians call the 398s, which is myths, fables, and fairy tales. An undocumented tree is worthless. All right, let's see who's next here. Come on. Didn't interview my relatives. You don't know who has what information. And when those relatives pass on, where does that information go? It goes with them. Okay, so take the time, even if maybe you have to overcome some bad family feelings, maybe this is the opportunity to mend some fences and rebuild bridges, okay? And again, you can make it a prayerful occasion if you need to. Some people do. Didn't keep a research log. That's another good one. In the old days of microfilm, you could go through a roll of microfilm, not find your family, and it wouldn't be there 2 years later. So it was important to record that I searched through this roll of microfilm for this person, and it was not there, okay? But in these days of data dumps and extraction processes and indexing, names are being added to files. I used to be able to carry the statistics around in my head when they would send us, the Family History Center, they'd send us CDs with indexes. And I could tell you there was 5 million on here, blah, blah. That's almost how many they're dumping a week of names into. So when you look in the New York whatever resource, if it's not there in April, it could be there in June. Okay, because you're constantly, so you need to create a research log that's going to show, okay, I searched this resource last May, maybe I need to do it again. Does that make sense? Okay, it's a little, these days, the internet genealogy is a little different. Yeah, personally, I just keep an Excel file because you can set it up however you want it. Does that make sense? And you can kind of keep track and sort it, what source you used. Are you familiar with Excel files? It's like a spreadsheet. It's not too terribly tricky. If I can teach people how to do it, you can do it. Because technology is barely at my pay grade. All right. Assuming everything is online. Everything is not online. I want you to picture that iceberg with just a little tiny tip above the surface and then so much beneath the surface, okay? You don't know what kind of letters have been saved in some archive somewhere, or what family Bible the DAR has in DC that hasn't been digitized yet. Don't ever assume everything is online. And the best way to find that out is a local historical society, okay? Do contact your local historical society because they may have something that Ancestry doesn't and Familysearch doesn't. I know several places that I would like to go and just dig around in their basement because I know they have that whole set of church records that I need. and they don't have at the Family History Library, and they don't have at Ancestry. So don't ever assume everything's online. Assumed everything is on Ancestry. Got my money's worth out of it. And these were free, by the way. Not everything's on Ancestry, just like everything isn't online. So if you do your search on Ancestry and you don't get what you want, don't think it's okay, case closed. Just keep looking, keep digging. And we discussed this a minute ago, as accepting others' trees as fact. Okay. Even when you follow that tree and they've got some documentation, did they analyze that documentation correctly? And that's going to be lost sight of my research goal. If ever there was a case of the pot calling the kettle black, that's me right there. Because you can go down rabbit holes, especially in the internet era of family history. You can go down rabbit holes and not come out for days. Okay? So keep that why in the forefront, even if you have to print it out and tack it to the wall in front of your device. Okay? Keep sight of that research goal. Now, if you have a Sunday afternoon with nothing to do, you know, and you want to go off on the side, but it's really easy to lose track of that goal, okay? And let's see, didn't analyze ancestry hints. I have a guy right now that I'm trying to document, and it's like there's two of him. There's a child by that name that was born on a date, and I have a death record less than a year later for the same name, same date, same place. Then I have a guy with the same birth date in the same place with the same parents who lived to be an adult. I have his marriage record. So I'm having to go back and analyze. Someone has just accepted that one hint as a fact and not kept digging. Do you see where I'm going with this? Yeah. Couple more. Was that the last one? I guess so. Well, any questions? Yes. The best way to start is with yourself and then build, okay? A case in point, my maternal grandmother's maiden name was Irving, and the family lived in New York, so ipso facto, Washington Irving is a relative. It didn't take too much time with his biography and a little bit of learning about the family to eliminate that, unless it's like way back, because he'd been in New York, whereas our ancestor had been in Canada at the same time. And so instead of jumping back and making some assumptions, if we had done that, we'd have built on a poor foundation, okay? Whereas me, okay, my mother, everything we know about her, her mother, okay, do you see where I'm going with this? And then you can build out. So don't ever make any kind of leap to, okay, here's this famous name, I must be related. Don't do that, just build, build, build. My son-in-law is a Bradford, and they think, oh, okay, William Bradford, Pilgrims, all that thing. There's a lot of generations between my son-in-law, who was born in 1980-something, and William Bradford that came over on the Mayflower. And there's a lot of documentation in there, so. Any other? Yes? Yes, that's an excellent question, because I've seen errors in almost every type of document. There are civil documents, like when you were born, they created a birth certificate, okay? Then sooner or later, you'll be in the census somewhere. Aren't we excited about the 1950 census coming out next month? Yeah. So if I had a vital record and a census record, I'd put more faith in that vital record, okay? You also have to think back to your history college classes where you learned about primary sources and secondary sources. A primary source was created at the time of the event, okay? A secondary source was created after the fact, okay? So you want to look at primary sources and then secondary sources. A secondary source would be a family history, whereas a primary source would be a census, but Census records are great little snapshots of your family history, but take them with a big grain of salt. Use them to document from other sources. I'm Italian, I have to do this, okay. A case in point is one of my French ancestors. They were immigrants from France living in Massachusetts, and he was listed in one of the census years as Emily. His name was Emile. Okay, so you have to take that source and use other ones like his military record and go from there. So any source almost really should be analyzed thoroughly before you can. So if I were you and you wanted to learn more about sources and their reliability, there's probably a Familysearch Wiki about it. Now, unfortunately, we have no internet, apparently. It's back? Yeah, you guys are the bomb diggity. I'm going to do this briefly, just for kicks. Let's see what we can do here. Because that's a really good question. Exit full screen. Don't tell the person that's doing the wiki. Let's see. Let me refresh. Are you sure it's back? Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, I see. But it's not asking me for username and password. It's not even showing that I have an internet out there. Yeah, I can't hand it to you. I can step aside. What I was going to do is go to Familysearch and put in resources or documentation and see what it had to say. The best thing to do.
Do you have a keyboard on this?
Yeah, I used to. There it is. Sorry.
Okay.
Sometimes you can outreach yourself technologically. Go to the Familysearch Wiki and put in documentation. There's probably an article on how to select the documentation, which is more reliable, which is less reliable.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we're going to sneak just for kicks. All right, so here's our landing page for Familysearch. Everybody, have you been to Familysearch? Maybe yes, no, find it kind of familiar. All right, so to research, to get to the wiki, I'm going to click search, and then you see down at the bottom of that drop box it says Research Wiki. Right there at the bottom, that little white rectangle that came down. Okay, it says Research Wiki. Trust me, I see some people squinting kind of bad. So we're going to hit Research Wiki. All right, and this is just what you think it is, like Wikipedia, only it's family. All right, so let's use the word. Sometimes the trick is the search term. Documentation, document as you go. You see, I wasn't kidding. I didn't like that very much. Let's take a look. I didn't like the way I spelled it either. Somehow we're in Moldova because I hit some kind of. Let's try sources. Sources. Let's see. Oops, sources and baby steps. Evidence baby steps. Let's take a look. Oh, and there's another one called citation baby steps. I know those of you who have been to college and hear the word citation and go, Okay, so evidence is more than information. It's the information we judge as genealogists to have some relevance to our research. Direct evidence, consistent and inconsistent evidence, indirect evidence, present and absent evidence. Just because you don't find a document doesn't mean it didn't happen, okay? And some recommended further sources and continuing education. So you see, if you use the right search term, you're going to get some sort of answer. And another, don't tell her I did this. I feel bad that I'm even doing this. So, military. So it should, okay. Yes, I did mean military. You know those I's and L's blend together. Might have to do United States military or something like that. It's all about the search terms, regardless of whether you're Googling it. Okay, here we go. So United States military records. And obviously, if you had an ancestor from another country, maybe you heard that one of your ancestors was at Waterloo. Obviously, you would do British military records, okay? So we're going to do, so you've got a whole list of whichever war it is you're looking for. Anything you see in blue is a link to some sort of documentation. It might be a completely different website. It might be within Familysearch. It might be suggesting something that's on Ancestry, which will present a problem, except, did you know? Anybody know about Galileo, not the Italian scientist, the website? Yes. So I'm going to pull it up if I can remember how the... Okay, so it's Galileo, just like the Italian scientist, .usg, University System of Georgia, .edu, okay? This is your Georgia tax dollars at work. They've created this website. Now, you can only access Ancestry through Galileo at your public library. Yeah. So if there's that document that Wikisearch sent you to, frequent your public library. Tell the librarian if you're having difficulty. In the old days, when I didn't have access to Ancestry, I would take my laptop, go to the library, get into that portal. Don't we hate the word portal? This is, Dr. Garrison Boyd is a friend of mine from work, and she's here today, and I'm really excited that she's here. And we have to contend with a portal on a regular basis, and students change their passwords, they get locked out of their portal. So anyway, I would get into that portal on Ancestry, close my laptop, come home, and it would still be there for a couple hours. Family history in your jammies, right? Anyway, so as you can see, there are lots and lots and lots of links to military records in the Wikipedia. And this is a rabbit hole down which you could go. So I have about 12 minutes. What can I... Oh, did I do, what did I do? Documentation? Let's click back and see how far we get. I think it was it resource or documentation? I think so. Sources and baby steps. And just about any search term you can think about. Maybe you find out you have Cherokee ancestors, you can do Native American. Maybe you find out you have ancestry from the Czech Republic. What do I know about the Czech Republic? Very little. But I can learn about it, and I'm keeping myself from going there because I know there's another class on it and I don't want to offend anyone. Also, Google it. That's another one. Also, if you're researching African American ancestry, there is, you all know about the Great Migration, how just thousands of black folks went north for better economic opportunities to escape Jim Crow. The Warmth of Other Suns is an excellent book. It's not as much of a how-to, but if you're looking to learn about what your ancestors may have experienced, this is a really good book. It's by Isabel Wilkerson. It's called The Warmth of Other Suns. And another good how-to is called Finding a Place Called Home for African American Family History. It's by D. Palmer Woodtor, and I'll keep these up here. I think we have like a little break between classes, and I thought I'd have a display table, but they ran on tables. That's okay. We can adapt, improvise, and overcome. Nobody has any questions? I don't want to short sheet you by ending early, but do get started. Do keep a track record. find some way that works for you, even if it's a blend of paper and computer, or it's a blend. I personally keep an offline resource. I do Roots Magic, and then I can upload a lot of it to Familysearch or Ancestry, mostly for document. You know, sometimes you get that hunch, you have that idea, is this right? When you put it online, you're essentially publishing it, okay? Whereas when you have it on your device, you can do whatever you want to. As you're researching from Ancestry, you're plugging some facts in and making some notes and things like that. So, yes. Roots Magic does. I haven't actually done it. Now, there is a way, if you've built a tree, say on Family Tree Maker or Roots Magic, there's a conversion process called GEDCOM, GEDCOM, that was developed as a sharing bridge for people who may have an Apple device and an Android device or whatever, and you can also upload your tree into Ancestry. You could. The only problem with that, though, is you don't get the kind of hints that you would get from both Familysearch and Ancestry. Familysearch's hints aren't as in your face as Ancestry's are. They're a little more subtle, and they don't always push that information into your tree as well as Ancestry's does. Any tree is editable. Both your Ancestry tree and your Familysearch tree are both editable. So anytime you make a mistake, you can go in and fix it. Especially if you find further information, like my poor Emily, who's really Emile, and then died in the Civil War. Yes? Mm-hmm. It depends on how much of a off the path you went. Personally, when I have done things like that, that's where you got to put that Sherlock Holmes deerstalker cap on and really analyze each piece of information. Why does this fit? Why does this not fit? Sometimes I get out a piece of paper and a pen and write down what facts I have and where I got those facts, what those resources are, how comfortable do I feel about this fact. Yeah, yes. And sometimes you do have to back down a generation. Also, don't neglect your lateral people, okay? Of my great-grandmother, who came from Ireland, her brother and sister, all three died in Massachusetts. I got all three of their death records. All three say Ireland, but only one, her brothers, said the county in Ireland that they were from. Okay, so especially when you've got to that sticking point, that brick wall that we call it, make sure you go lateral. Does that make sense? Research the brothers and sisters, because, you know, I was lucky because I grew up around almost all of her 10 children. One of them was my grandfather, but we called them the aunts, capital A. And so they gave me a great foundation on which to build. You know, take what you know and then build and document and build and document. But if I hadn't had the aunts, had I not paid any attention to her brother's information, then I wouldn't have known it was County Monaghan that she came from. I would have only had Ireland. That makes sense? All right. Any other questions? I'm going to hang around for a little bit. Yes, ma'am. There's a lot more, because I had this question before from my friend Sharon Garner, the one who had Polish and Cherokee and African American. And I was really surprised to find out just how much there was out there. For one thing, they took a census before they threw everybody out of Georgia and sent them to Oklahoma. And that's another topic that you can go to this Familysearch Wiki and look for, and it will give you lots and lots of information on Native American tribes. Yes? It depends on, we started out with why, and that why you're doing this will drive what you're doing. Like, if you're trying to get in the DAR, you need to be much more precise with your documents. But with the standalone apps like Roots Magic and Family Tree Maker, the family trees, whether it's Wiki, Ancestry, any one of the trees, there's always a place to put a note. There's sources. You can create your own sources in either Ancestry or Familysearch. Familysearch is a little trickier, but it's doable in both of them. If it's a paper document, you can scan it and add it as an image. If you had a conversation with Aunt Grace, you can write that in there somewhere. Aunt Grace said. Now, you know, sometimes you got to take what Aunt Grace says with a grain of salt. So you use that to document. Aunt Grace said this, but I found this in the document. And then further researchers can decide for themselves how reliable this source is and how reliable that source is. That makes sense? You got to be a Sherlock Holmes to do this, to do it properly. That makes sense? I really enjoyed being here with everyone today. I always love it when people are willing to listen to me yap about family history. I think I have business cards if you want my email address. I think, is my contact information in the sheet that, no, it's not? Okay, I have business cards with me. So if you want a business card, you want to get in touch with me. Also, if you're near Fayetteville, we have a Wednesday night, I don't even want to call it a class. It's very informal. We just pretty much sit around a table and talk about what we're doing in our family history. Sometimes I will say, well, I found this news in family history or this story about, and we go from 7 to 8 o'clock. It's on the church building in Fayetteville. It's on Red Wine Road. It's right just down from Whitewater Country Club. How do we describe that, sisters? Oh, yeah. Just north of the corner of Peachtree Parkway and Red Wine. We meet at 7 o'clock almost every Wednesday night, and we have a good time. So if you have questions, you want to get more in depth about any of this, just let me know. All right, thanks for coming today, and the very best to you in your research.